Okay, welcome everyone to this press conference by the Foreign Ministers Valtonen and Stenergard. My name is Mikko Koivumaa. I'm the Director General of Communications at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Finland, and I will be moderating this session. We're slightly delayed from the original schedule, and we'll try to extend with a few minutes at the end if necessary. So we have time until about 11:35. We will start with short statements by the ministers, and then we will have time for Q&A. I will be helping you in giving you the floor. We will now start with a statement by the Finnish Foreign Minister, Ms. Elina Valtonen. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mikko and Maria. Great to have you here in Hanalys today. We are only 6 weeks into 26. It feels like it's been quite a year already, and this is actually the third time already this year we meet with Maria, and there will be plenty of more meetings which I look forward to. Now, together, Finland and Sweden, we of course are one of the strongest advocates of Ukraine and a just and lasting peace. At the same time, we must increase pressure on Russia and its war economy. And certainly together, we are not only worried, but we are making all the efforts needed to secure Europe also after a possible peace deal. The 20th sanctions package is central to this effort. Last month, together with Sweden, we put forward a proposal for a comprehensive ban on maritime services for Russian oil exports. The inclusion of the ban in the Commission proposal is positive in itself, but it also shows that if Finland and Sweden tie their hands together and make joint advocacy, it truly is powerful. Together, we have supported sectorial import tariffs on Russian and Belarusian products, and we call on the Commission to move forward with the proposal on new import tariffs to help both in this circumstance but also into the future. A new element in this year's Hanalys discussions is the link between economic security and its power to create security. In today's world, prosperity is power, and the EU is our most important instrument for both. Finland and Sweden have therefore taken a joint initiative on European strategic competitiveness. Our non-paper sets out a clear direction for strengthening the European Union over the long term, and our goal for this week's informal EU leaders meeting will be based on that document. We argue for a bolder, more competitive Europe, a stronger and freer single market, deeper and more liquid capital markets, more private investment and freer trade. And let me close off, since we had the Olympics running and last time there were Olympics, I was so glad that our cooperation between Finland and Sweden is so close, because we could say in Finland that together we had 11 medals in the Olympics. Now we together already have 2 in this Olympics, so let's see how many there are going to be. And you know what, Maria, thanks to this cooperation, together we also have 1,340 kilometers of border with Russia.
Right.
But with these words, a warm welcome to Helsinki again, my friend, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, dear Elina. It's really great to be back in Finland, and I am so grateful for our cooperation. And ever since I took office, we have remained in very close contact, and I very much value our contact and our open dialogue. Hanalys offers a beautiful backdrop to a frank discussion on how the geopolitical landscape is changing and how Sweden and Finland can navigate in this new environment together. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the partnership between Sweden and Finland has grown even stronger, more strategic and more action-oriented. Since the world is so unpredictable, it is essential that we in the Nordic-Baltic family stick together and provide predictability, security and prosperity. It is clear that Sweden and Finland are united in our support for Ukraine. Our most fundamental task is to strengthen Ukraine and to increase our pressure on Russia. It is also clear that the sanctions are working. The Russian economy is struggling. As presented in Sälen a couple of weeks ago, Sweden and Finland, like Elina mentioned, have proposed a full services maritime ban covering all vessels carrying Russian energy imports, further sanctions also against Russian fertilizers, and a ban on EU exports of luxury goods to Russia. And we welcome that the Commission put forward a proposal for a 20th sanctions package on the table. Sweden strongly supports the inclusion of a maritime services ban on Russian crude oil. We welcome coordination with G7 and the oil price cap coalition. At the same time, it is important that the EU moves forward with this measure independently and without delay. We would also have liked to see more ambitious measures against imports of Russian fertilizers and a luxury goods export ban. Last year, the EU imported strategically important goods such as fertilizers from Russia to a value of 35 billion euro. We need to do more to decouple from Russia, it's quite obvious. At no time in history has security cooperation in Northern Europe been more important. Sweden and Finland are working closely together with other allies to establish FLF Finland, and implementation is moving forward without delay. FLF Finland will significantly strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense in the High North. The tasks ahead of us are hard and complex. That's why we need close friends. That's why we need even closer cooperation, and in our region, in Europe, and with like-minded partners across the world. And as I've said before, the partnership between Sweden and Finland is not just valuable, it's invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Malmer Stenergard. Thank you, Minister Valtonen. And now we have time for Q&A, some 15 minutes. And we will take questions in a bundle of 3. So please raise your hand, wait for the mic. And before you make your question, please introduce yourself, your name and affiliation, and then remember to say to whom you address your question. We will start from this side. We have 4 questions, but we will start with 3. Please.
Niilo Sumäki from the Finnish news agency STT. A question for both ministers. You mentioned the maritime services sanction. Do you see this as a solution to the current situation where Russia is circumventing the sanctions and exporting oil all the time? And when it comes to the fertilizers, is that still on the table that eventually there would be an EU sanction also for Russian fertilizer exports?
Then next question from the middle. Thank you.
Antonia Berg, MTV News here in Finland. Jag skulle vilja ha ett svar både på svenska och sen av Elina Valtonen suomeksi. Mä haluaisin ton edellisen kysymyksen vastauksen myös suomeksi sinulta. Stenergard, Kaja Kallas besökte Finland förra veckan och hon tog upp till diskussion att vi borde diskutera ett europeiskt kärnvapenskydd eftersom situationen är vad den är med USA. Så hur ser du på det och hur ser man på den här debatten i Sverige? Tack.
Jyrki Hara from the Finnish Broadcasting Company. I was just dropped off my question actually, but I come up with something else. The United States is allegedly giving up the command of Norfolk and turning it over to Britain, I think. Finland and Sweden both, as you well know, are part of Norfolk and wanted to be that and became that. Is this move by the US something to be, I don't know, concerned about maybe?
Thank you. So let's start with these questions. We will start with Minister Valtonen, please.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. Now I could actually easily say that whatever Maria was going to say on maritime services ban and fertilizers, I will be exactly of the same opinion, but let me be just extremely quick and then I will do that in Finnish so that you will have the answer in that. Now, we do think that increasing sanctions pressure on Russia is extremely important in this circumstance because we haven't seen any concessions from Russia properly to really advance in the peace negotiations. They are not letting go of their maximalist goals. Now, we do think that the maritime services ban implemented as the European Union and optimally as actually the G7 would be a very powerful step to really hamper the movement of the shadow fleet, which also, like we can see with the Baltic Sea basically totally in ice or totally frozen, is also a massive environmental risk, and of course is a strategic enabler for Russia's war of aggression. On the fertilizers, we stick to our common position, which we came out with in Sälen a month ago, and we hope that at some point we will be able to ban Russian fertilizers from the European market. Suomeksi todella tämä meripalvelukielto olisi keskeinen toimi sille, että voitaisiin vähentää Venäjän kykyä käyttää minkälaisia kuljetuksia sen öljylle ja myös laajemmin kaikille hiilivedyille, jotka on aivan keskeinen osa Venäjän vientiä ja sitä kautta sen tuloja sotakoneistolle. Ja meidän tavoitteena on tosiaan se, että tämä palvelukielto saataisiin voimaan paitsi EU-alueella, niin laajemmin koko G7 toimesta, koska silloin sillä olisi todella merkittävä vaikutus. Ja todella mitä tulee lannoitteisiin, niin meidän positio on selvä, eli olemme sitä mieltä, että jollain aikavälillä olisi tärkeää, että venäläisten lannoitteiden tuonti EU-alueelle saataisiin päättymään. And then well, maybe you take these and then I will take thereafter if there's a need, please.
Okay, thank you, Elina. Well, I agree with everything that Elina said regarding the full maritime services ban, but I think it's important to remember that there is not one solution that can stop Russia. So they constantly try to find new ways of circumventing the sanctions, and that means that we also constantly need to find new ways of stopping them. So after the 20th sanctions package, we will have to come up with the 21st and the 22nd and the 23rd, because this is constantly moving. But it is important that we take all measures needed, and we have provided very substantial proposals on how we can do that, and I think it's important that the EU moves forward with this. I think that around 20% of our imports of fertilizers still come from Russia. That's unacceptable. And there are alternatives, for example, on the Canadian market. So it is now time to move on and take that cost, because it is going to cost us less in the future if we do that. På svenska då, gällande Kaja Kallas uttalande, så har vi ju en europeisk kärnvapenavskräckning genom USA, Storbritannien och Frankrike. Och det är klart att vi ständigt måste föra diskussioner inom alliansen om hur vi bäst genomför den avskräckningen. Det är ju helt uppenbart att det måste ske ett skifte, och det gör det ju också när det gäller den konventionella avskräckningen, i form av att Europa tar större ansvar för den, och det är därför vi också gör så stora investeringar, både Sverige och Finland, men också övriga Europa, i vårt eget försvar. När det gäller europeiska kärnvapen så är ju franskt och Storbritanniens kärnvapen ska väl ses snarare som komplement till det som USA står för. Men att USA fortfarande står bakom artikel 5 är ingenting som jag tvivlar på. And as regards the question regarding Norfolk, do you want to?
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, what we or how we are organizing ourselves in the alliance, also in terms of the command structure, is obviously something which is constantly being looked at, also as parts of the defense planning process. Now, even different changes, what comes to the command flags, so to say, will have no changes whatsoever or implications on the overall structure or the functioning of the alliance. I think it is just, especially going forward, only an asset if also Europeans are moving higher ahead also in the command structure. And the main thing remains, which is strong transatlantic relationship and cooperation within the alliance.
Thank you. Then we will take one more question from this side before moving to this side of the room.
Nurmi, Foreign and Security Policy Correspondent, Iltalehti, Finland. A question for both ministers. What after full ban on maritime services, what is the next concrete goal for Sweden and Finland? And what kind of signs, evidence do we have that the Russian economy is falling, collapsing? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then next two questions from this side of the room. Okay, thank you, Lauri. Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Anni Keski-Heikkilä for Ilta-Sanomat. Is it realistic to think that the war in Ukraine could come to an end before the summer? And is it beneficial to have these sort of deadlines stated out loud?
Thank you. And then, yeah, Jani.
Carmela Waller, Svenska Yle. I och med att jag representerar svensk media så ställer jag frågan på svenska. Den gäller lite dagens tema, det vill säga Finland och Sverige är båda länder som är mycket beroende av export för tillväxt. Sen har vi de stormakterna som allt mera drar sig tillbaka och föredrar så att säga att bli självförsörjande. Så hur ska länder som Sverige och Finland kunna få till stånd tillväxt och därigenom kunna satsa på försvaret i nuläget?
Thank you. And this round we can start with Minister Malmer Stenergard, please.
Okay, thank you very much for those questions. I think that we will have to take several steps in order to stop the Russian revenues from all fossil export. So in the 20th sanctions package, there are proposals on crude oil, but we also need to move forward with the gas, the LNG. So we will continue to push for these further sanctions, and also on fertilizers and also the export of luxury goods, which is not something that is of economic significance, but that is morally very important to show the Russian population that you cannot go on as usual if you're in a war with Europe and with Ukraine. Can the war be over, or how do we see that the Russian economy is suffering? So the Stockholm Institute of Economics, they did this, they have done some thorough investigation of this, and they have, among other things, concluded that the inflation is twice as high as the Russians claim. And they really have a hard time finding the money for their investments that is constantly being needed to produce what they need for the warfare. So it is obviously so that they are bleeding at the same time. Of course, they are a country that are willing to invest a lot in warfare, but we will have to continue to make sure that it hurts to wage this horrible war against Ukraine. Then I will give the answer in Swedish, and then I will hand over to you, maybe Elina. So this was about growth, right? På svenska. Så jag skulle vilja säga att när vi sitter på möten, jag och Elina, så är vi nog de som är absolut tydligast med att vi måste fortsätta med frihandel, och vi måste motstå de trender vi ser med ökad protektionism, för det är inte någonting som gynnar vår tillväxt och våra ekonomier. Och jag är väldigt glad att vi har den här samsynen och att vi tillsammans kan vara en mycket stark röst i det, för jag ser en risk när stormakterna nu drar sig tillbaka, blir mer isolationistiska, som jag sa tidigare idag, och protektionistiska, att det också smittar av sig. Men istället så måste vi ta det här tillfället i akt och förhandla fler frihandelsavtal med andra länder. Jag tror att det är många som har vaknat upp nu. på gott och ont och insett att vi har lagt alldeles för många ägg i samma korg. Vi behöver diversifiera och vi behöver knyta närmare band till dem som man kan lita på. Och Norden inte minst, men Europa i stort betraktas som länder som man verkligen kan lita på. Det är en valuta som vi verkligen ska utnyttja i det här läget.
Okej, kanske fortsätter jag med det. Jag håller helt med vad Maria sa. Och det jag vill också betona är att till exempel den amerikanska marknaden är ju inte stängd för oss. Tvärtom, vi båda som Sverige och Finland, vi har mycket kunskaper inom strategiska teknologiska områden vilka är så viktiga för USA att alltså vi har ännu mera tillväxt än vi har haft tidigare. Till exempel vad gäller nätverk, vi har ju Ericsson och Nokia och alltså många olika teknologiska områden vilka vi kan fortsätta att handla i med USA och förstås med alla våra viktiga allierade. Och sen är budskapen från oss till USA att det skulle vara lättare om vi hade inga tullar eller inga förhindrelser till handel mellan vänner och allierade. Det vi har pratat om med våra amerikanska kollegor hela tiden. Och på det sättet är det också viktigt att vi som EU inte har haft, alltså vi har haft noll linje på vad gäller tullar mot USA och vi hoppas att i framtiden kommer vi ha hellre en frihandelsområde inom NATO än mera protektionism som Maria sa. Men också är lösningen det förstås att vi hittar nya marknader och öppnar nya frihandels avkommen med andra länder och områden i världen. And then the question on the war, whether it should end or whether it's likely that it will end by the summer and whether it's helpful to have deadlines. Well, I think it's good that President Trump is massively invested in finding an end to the war. We want to have peace. Everybody wants to have peace. Now, what is also extremely important is what form of peace will come out, not only for Ukraine, but also for the rest of Europe. So therefore, I think more important than any deadline is the actual outcome. Having said this, I am extremely concerned about the humanitarian condition in Ukraine as we speak. Russia is making use of the extreme cold, which is not only currently, but has been prevalent in Ukraine for the past days and weeks even. There are millions of people without heating, without electricity, without water, and this obviously cannot go on for a very long time. And Russia is making use of this catastrophic situation for their war effort, because obviously they are not making too much progress on the battlefield, so therefore they try with the meanest of ways to alter the willingness of the population to defend itself through these means. And I think if we are concerned about the killing, then we definitely should be most concerned about the killing of civilians deliberately that Russia is taking care of right now as we speak. So that should be ended. We call for an immediate ceasefire as soon as possible. Obviously, an energy ceasefire for only a couple of days will not do the trick, but that could be a very important start to at least start with the energy infrastructure. Obviously, Ukraine has been ready for that for ages, but Russia not. So that clearly shows that Russia is not interested in peace, and while there are peace talks ongoing, they just keep bombing those civilian infrastructures and people. That has to stop. And then finally, not much to add to the Russian economy. The only thing what we have observed is that when Russia started this full full-scale invasion 4 years ago. Of course, everybody, I mean, including us, but definitely Russia thought that it would be over in a couple of weeks. Well, we weren't perhaps that pessimistic, but still, nobody thought that it will take 4 years. But anyway, Russia had tens, even hundreds of billions of net wealth assets to make use of for their war effort. Now, more or less, all of those net wealth funds have been depleted, and famously also the central bank assets have been frozen in the West. And luckily, we as the European Union have been able to make significant decisions to keep them frozen for as long as needed. Now, Russia is not able to lend from the outside or to borrow from the outside, so basically it has been borrowing only domestically. And we have been observing that, as Maria said, the inflation is extremely high, and the domestic interest rates are massively high, which places a significant burden on the domestic industries, especially those industries which are not in the war economy. Which means that structurally, Russia is really not having a very good time economically. On the very contrary, there will be likely, if this goes on like this, a massive hike in bankruptcies during this year, and it might lead to a situation where things spin out of control. But this is not what we are counting on, because we need to have the war end. And we saw, unfortunately, that even with the Soviet Union, it was able to take the entire repression of the people was able to continue for even years, even though the economic model was close to collapsing for years. All of a sudden it did, and we hope that will happen with Russia too, and that finally the Russian people will also be able to live in a free society without repression and decide on their own political leadership.
If I may just
Please.
add on whether the war will stop this summer, it's not only a passive assessment that we could or could not make, it's also up to us to change the equation. So we need to put more pressure on Russia, and that's why we are proposing the things we are proposing, but we also need to increase the support to Ukraine. So the Nordic countries really have done a lot. Last year, our countries together provided 1/3 of all military support provided by the NATO countries to Ukraine. I mean, it's incredible. We have a population of less than 30 million, and the NATO countries together have a population of almost 1 billion, and we provide for 1/3. If everyone else was to do the same, or at least close to the same, the war would probably already be over in favor of Ukraine. So it is also up to us. Thank you.
Thank you, ministers. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our session. The stream from this session will be published on the MFA YouTube channel as soon as possible. Thank you for joining.